Hello and good morning, everyone from New York City. I am Sarah Demy, founder and CEO of Demy-Colton, and on behalf of the Demy-Colton team, along with our partner for this salon, Biotech Digital Partnering, it is my pleasure to welcome you to the 52nd installment of the Demy-Colton Virtual Salon Series. As usual, we welcome all past participants back, and we welcome all of you who are joining us for the very first time. Demy-Colton's mission is to convene healthcare industry leaders to advance the sector and catalyze change. We do this through our in-person events, including our Biotech CEO Summit, which just took place in Napa, Biotech Showcase, which takes place during the JP Morgan Healthcare Conference out in San Francisco, our executive clinics, which are launching this November, our Biotech virtual salons, such as this one today, and BioFuture, which will take place in New York City this October, and will bring together people from across the healthcare and biopharma ecosystem. Join us. More information can be found on our website, biofuture.com. Before we start today's salon, I'd like to introduce Joost Rengli. He's the COO and partner at Venture Valuation, as well as Biotech Gate Digital Partnering, located in Switzerland, who will say a few words. Joost.
Thanks very much, Sarah, for this kind introduction. And it's a great pleasure for us to have this collaboration with Demy-Colton, with you. So as you already mentioned, so this panel, this workshop is also part of Biotech Gate Digital Partnering, which takes place this week. So the goal of digital partnering is to connect life science professionals worldwide. And we have again around 1,000 participants joining digital partnering this week, which is great. And if you are joining Biotech Gate Digital Partnering, which by the way is free, so the basic participation is free of charge, you may have seen on the agenda page that we have put together again a full week of sessions, workshops, and of course the opportunity for one-on-one partnering meetings. So with saying this, we hope you enjoy this digital partnering and of course this panel discussion. And I'm handing over back to you, Sarah. Looking forward to this session today.
Thank you. Thank you, Joost. We so appreciate our partnership with you. Thank you very much. So we're going to switch over to our spotlight panel, to our discussion today, our virtual salon. The focus is spotlight panels, a new way to maximize visibility for innovative biotech companies, which we're introducing at BioFuture this year. For some housekeeping notes, we will start with a 55-minute discussion, then go into a Q&A session. This salon is being recorded and will be available for on-demand viewing later today. And certainly it will also be available on Biotech Gate Digital Partnering. Now to today's salon. I am really pleased to introduce our moderator, Lila Taylor. Lila Taylor is Demy-Colton's Chief Business Officer, and I turn it over to her and she will introduce her great panelists. Lila, the virtual mic is yours.
Thank you so much, Sarah, and it is a pleasure to introduce this panel. Good morning, good afternoon, and welcome to the virtual salon that Sarah mentioned is our Spotlight Panels, a new way to maximize visibility and innovative biotech companies. I'm the Chief Business Officer of Demy-Colton, and I'd like to introduce today's discussion. We are honored to be joined by a truly exceptional group of panelists, leaders representing the highest level of investment, communications, and business development in the biotech and pharmaceutical sectors. Each brings a wealth of experience partnering with groundbreaking companies, advancing transformative science, and shaping relationships across the industry. Today, among other things we'll discuss, we're going to introduce the new and innovative Spotlight Panels at BioFuture New York, debuting this October. This is an interactive format that goes far beyond traditional pitches in isolated rooms. These sessions are crafted to foster real-time engagement, elevate company visibility, and create opportunities for meaningful dialogue with key investors, partners, and influencers. Our panelists will share advice today on how to communicate your story, stand out amid competition, and leverage these panels, among other panels in your yearly conference experience, to maximize strategic impact. Their insights are drawn from years of experience evaluating, guiding, and partnering with some of the most successful companies around today. Before we delve into their perspectives on this exciting new format, I'd like to invite each of our speakers to introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about their backgrounds. Can we go ahead and start with you, Carolyn?
Hi, everyone. Good morning. I'm Carolyn, partner here at TPG Life Sciences Innovations. So TPG is a large private equity firm that's actually headquartered in San Francisco, where we have deep and broad exposure to healthcare. And I co-manage the Life Sciences Innovations Fund, where we focus on earlier stages of investment where companies are pre-revenue and are developing a therapeutic or device or in pharma services. And I'm also an oncology scientist by training prior to coming into venture investing. So looking forward to our discussion today. Great to meet all of you.
Thank you so much. Yuri, could you introduce yourself? Oh, you're on mute.
It has to happen to at least somebody, so I'm happy to take the hit for everyone. Hi, everyone. I'm Uriel Patton. I'm an infectious disease doc by training. I'm also currently an operating partner at Khosla Ventures. We're a multi-sector, multi-stage, multi-billion-dollar fund that invests from seed all the way through last check before IPO. We are a general fund that invests in innovative technology, including biotech broadly, so anything devices, therapeutics, diagnostics. By background, I'm also, after having done a stint in big pharma, had the pleasure of being a serial biotech founder, founded 2 biotech companies as CEO and CMO, and I'm currently also sitting as CEO of a small biotech.
Chris, could you introduce yourself?
Hi, good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining. My name is Chris Vlahos. I'm Vice President of External Innovation at Acadia Pharmaceuticals. External innovation is the scientific assessment side of business development, so I represent the buy side of pharma. I like to say I know what pharma will buy and why, and what pharma won't buy and why not. I've been with Acadia about 8 months. Prior to that, I was at Eli Lilly, both in a capacity in discovery cardiovascular as well as in their external innovation group, and at Ipsen Pharmaceuticals for 6 years, leading external innovation in rare diseases.
Thank you, Chris. And last but not least, Jason.
Thank you, Sarah. Yeah, my name is Jason Spark. I am the Chief Biotechnology Officer at Inisio Evoke Communications. I'm also a scientist by training from UC San Diego. But the past 25 years, I've been in biotechnology corporate communications, working with emerging stage biotech and life sciences companies of all stages, from Series A, emerging from stealth, through the IPO process and a number of publicly held companies, including those that are transitioning to commercial. So happy to be here today. Thank you for the invitation, Sarah.
Thank you, Jason. It's lovely to have you here. So I'm going to go ahead and kick off the discussion. And for our first question, I want to reflect on a really good conversation we had preparing for this panel earlier this week. I heard from everyone on the panel that human interaction remains crucial for deal making of any type. For the whole panel, or whoever feels like jumping in, can you expand on that and give examples of information you can get from seeing a company pitch in person or meet in person that you can't get from a Zoom or email deck?
You can start, Lila. For me, one of the most important things is the networking opportunity. The post presentation discussion in the hallway when the meeting is ending, to get more information, make the contact, and really start the dialogue between our company and the potential partner.
Good point.
It's also, I think, about body language, which I think we can read to a certain extent on Zoom, but it's definitely way better in person live. So I think the way the body language and the stance by which the team answers certain questions, it's actually definitely provide more color, I think, in person.
And maybe just to double down on that, I firmly agree with both. The white space between meetings matters sometimes more than the meetings itself. And it's not just the body language at the table when you're sitting with folks, it's how people carry themselves, how they're acting the rest of the time. Because when we think about how we allocate funds into different companies, only part of it's into the science, the rest of it's into the people executing the science. And so the best way to understand that is to meet the people.
Yeah, just to add to that too, I think it's, it's going beyond transactional. I think just seeing somebody in person, you get a feel for who they are, how they're going to perform. I think too, it's not just in that moment, right, that you're looking for that deal. It's a long-term relationship, it's a long-term partnership. You're also looking how they're going to, in a deal, how, or such as a financing, how that's how are they going to raise their next round, right? So I think when seeing that person, live in action, telling their story, their authentic, true self, if they can, if they can deliver now, you get some more confidence they're going to be able to deliver later.
Thank you, Jason. I was going to ask about that, and we'll get in more on how you might prepare your clients for these interactions. Another thing that came out of our discussion preparing for this was that many conference attendees are now using AI note takers. What should companies take into consideration when preparing their messaging to make sure it is interpreted clearly and favorably by this new technology?
Well,
I
I guess
can
I'll
start.
go ahead, Caroline. Go ahead.
Actually, it's pretty simple for us. We just don't allow it, actually. For compliance reasons, we don't allow actually AI notes taking, at least for now. I think before we figure out a way that can be compliant with our processes. So usually we request for company to actually switch it off. But this is maybe not standard across the industry. So happy for Jason, you to jump in.
Yeah, no, I love hearing that. I think that's good feedback. My view on this is, for all companies to think algorithmically about their story, right? That humans have been always been a key audience, but we're starting to think of machines as audiences now. And this isn't terribly a foreign concept, right? We've been thinking of Google as an audience, search engine optimization for quite some time. How can we optimize our content for consumption by search engines so that it's easily found and elevated in rankings? But, with AI now, we are seeing a lot of companies, a lot of individuals, doing their research, leaning into AI for it, uploading a PowerPoint presentation, uploading a script from an earnings call, uploading press releases, summarize this for me. There are sophisticated prompts to kind of gather information out of it. So, how do you elevate or ensure that it's hard to ensure, but how do you elevate what is being summarized and organized and captured in a way? So we are thinking quite a bit about how AI reads our content. So thinking about how AI or machines are consuming our content.
And to chime in, I think that how we think about AI and how it interprets what we say versus how people interpret what we say also depends a bit on the context. As we speak about panels versus one-on-one meetings, it's always important to be succinct. It's always important to be clear that people are, carbon-based recording is always challenged, but silicon-based AI recording is even more challenged because it's going to hew in on whatever it thinks the context is. If you drift from the context and meander in your responses, no point will be absorbed, even though the words will be transcribed. And it is therefore extremely important to figure out the key messages you want to deliver ahead of a panel, just the same way it is the key messages ahead of a one-on-one with any investor.
I would definitely agree with that. I work with a lot of the companies that present at our conferences, and I always advise them to make it easy for your audience to take the information in and say yes. I want to move on to our next question. So our spotlight panels, which I mentioned we're debuting for the first time at BioFuture, mark a move away from the traditional pitch where you're in a small room where there's an audience that is only for that particular session and they have to choose between other things at the conference, to a main stage event that's more dynamic and real-time dialogue. So just to give everyone an outline of this, there's 5 minutes for all 5 companies on the panel to introduce themselves, followed by a question and answer moderated session and interaction with the audience. So I guess what I wanted to ask about that is, what do you see as key advantages to this approach in elevating visibility for companies and sparking genuine interactions, both for potential investors and pharma partners?
As a partner who has attended, I guess the traditional format where there's 7 or 8 companies, they each get 10 minutes to pitch, and maybe I just want to hear 2 or 3 of those companies having to either sit through it and therefore take time away from something else I should be doing, or run the possibility of coming late if they're off schedule. I kind of like the interactive way that the new format is proposed. Plus, I think it'd be advantageous to see the panelists interact with each other, see how they can think on their feet as well, and leverage learnings that they've had in the panel too. I think that would be very informative.
And I think it really maybe forces discipline in how you communicate a story. I think to Uri's point earlier, I think we're trying to get the key messages out of what actually the company is really about. How does it differentiate it? What problems it's trying to solve? And sometimes in long form format, the message gets lost with perhaps too much information, right? And as a potential investor and as a potential partner, all you want to distill down, especially when you're looking at the large volume of companies, it's really just 1 or 2 points about each company that you're trying to even remember. Sometimes I barely remember what I ate for breakfast. So I think that the too much information is not always a good thing, and I think this format might force more discipline in distilling it down to the most important points.
One of the things that a panel has as an advantage is it pre-specifies what are theoretically important questions, right? Because otherwise not interesting on a panel. So those questions give the different teams a chance to shine, because in theory there is a differentiated approach from any of the different groups as to how to respond to a fundamental important point that probably has something to do with somebody's investor or thesis somewhere out there. So generic answers are probably bad. Answers that speak to your strengths are probably good. And it sounds obvious, but it's easy to put in platitudes. Our brains are sort of wired for them.
I'll just add to echo what's been said, but the format, I think, elevator forces an individual to really be sharp, right? You're a little bit competitive for time with 3 or 4 others on the stage with you. So, it also keeps it short and tight, which I think is just the nature of the way we communicate in this modern world, short, snackable sound bites. There isn't a lot of patience for long responses. And finally, I want to throw a nod to the moderator. I think that's this unsung hero in this. Right? I think that the moderator can really create a dynamic conversation by weaving in and out of things that are interesting, not only to what they're hearing, but what they think the audience needs to hear, and really kind of creates an environment for the panelists to perform. That's, I think of Jimmy Fallon quite a bit. I like, yeah, he does a great job, right? Helping his guests shine with interesting, things to talk about.
That's a great point, and we will definitely put moderators in place for this that can allow these companies to shine. I'm taking volunteers. Speak to you all afterwards. This one is actually for Chris, because I know we're speaking a lot about investment and pharmaceutical partnerships. But everyone feel free to jump in. From your vantage point, supporting business development and partnerships throughout your career, what qualities or strategies make a company memorable to potential partners during interactions at conferences and industry events? What attracts you and keeps people from just blending in?
I mean, I think the first thing is be succinct and on point. Often we see data dumps, and it's really not the right audience or right format to do that. What is the one or two key pieces of data you want to use to demonstrate your point, your thesis? The second is the thesis itself. I mean, at the end of the day, we are looking for things that are going to be clearly differentiated from standard of care. There may be a robust pipeline in that same indication or mechanism. How does your product stand out? Is it, we're not necessarily looking at Me Too's or incremental changes, one pill instead of two, for example. But in today's environment, it really has to have some signal that it could demonstrate a better efficacy, better experience for the patients, better outcomes, because that's where we're headed now in terms of both payers and providers, especially in a global market. So differentiation is really going to be our key take-home message on that.
Jason, I was going to ask you, when you are working with clients who are specifically looking for partnerships, are there any special tips that you would give them to stand out to pharma?
Well, I don't know that it's unique to pharma versus, say an investor audience, but it is just, knowing the story, in your differentiation. So just a very clear, crisp positioning and differentiation within the marketplace. I think, being willing to share where a company sees their program fit, I think is, within that marketplace is pretty important. Right now, some of the, what are the big questions that we're getting at, or, it's operational efficiency and pipeline focus. So, if a company can really focus in on that and hit that early and often, I think that kind of, creates an opportunity for a follow-up conversation.
Well, I'd like to move on to a variation on that. I work with many experienced founders and companies, but I still see some of the same slip-ups happen, even with experienced and sometimes with the earlier stage companies as well. How can early stage founders prepare to make the most of industry panels and networking opportunities? What are the common pitfalls and negative signals that they should really stay away from?
Overhype. Pipeline in a pill, for example, is, says to me, drug without an indication. And so, again, tying the target to the mechanism to the disease, that type of story will resonate because at least you have a cause and effect, and if you have something that you can measure, but overhyping things is very negative.
And on the exact opposite side of the spectrum, slamming other things, like being overly negative about anybody else's approach, because you never know who else is involved. You don't know who people know. It just on the human level, it's wrong, and it's again, it's part of how we assess the player as well as the game. Do we want to be working with this individual? And people who are intrinsically negative about other folks in an unfiltered way, just for that reason alone, it's a good reason not to be intrinsically negative, despite the fact that it may also be wrong, and then you don't end up looking terribly great.
Yeah.
Very good.
Or being ignorant, actually, of your competition. I think it's definitely a big red flag if they do not show that they're knowledgeable about how the competitive space is evolving, or they do not have enough knowledge of the competing programs and how either the status of those programs or how they're moving forward and differentiation between them. And, and yes, I think the attitude towards them is also important, like being overly dismissive. Like you said, it's very negative, but being not knowledgeable or being ignorant about them, it's, in my mind, it's probably even worse. So otherwise, that means that you don't know how to contextualize how your program operates in the wider world and landscape.
I'd like to double down on what Carolyn said. The thing that I see missing from slide decks from presenters most often is a complete competitive analysis slide. And even from the very, very earliest stages, companies should know who else is in the space, who's doing something similar to them. So I would like to make this next one also generally for the audience, if you have examples where at a panel or forum or personal interaction, you actually had a positive outcome and there was something about it that led to an investment or to a partnership. Don't need to mention the company, but if you have some positive stories, that would be great.
So I'm happy to jump on that from the standpoint of being a operator. So I was founder and chief medical officer of a company assembly many years ago, and spent as a CMO spent many a time on panels discussing the state of the art and the state of the field. Those panels were one of the best ways in terms of engagement with investors because it was a bunch of chief medical officers or C-suite CEO answering questions that had to do with the clinical development of various programs. Similar to the types of things that are going to be happening here. The engagement afterwards with analysts, engagement with funds was not only on point because people wanted to unpack a succinct answer. If they felt they knew everything, there was no point in follow-up. If there's something succinct, people wanted to follow up. Some of the conversations that started then turned into relationships with investors that then invested in subsequent companies and that I'm still friends with. So it's a opening of a door if handled correctly, and it's incredibly valuable.
Yeah, for me, I can recall at least one instance, and without naming names on this public forum, there was at least one instance where in a setting where I got to catch up with the investor, and in passing, that investor mentioned that one of the companies that he's involved with that we've met before and declined is actually raising a new round. And out of curiosity, I decided to follow up after that passing remark, and we actually ended up being an investor into that opportunity. So I think that's the benefit of live interactions, is all these little moments of time that you get to interact with each other beyond the regular Zoom format that sometimes can lead to unexpected outcomes.
Chris, I know that you have had pitches and interaction with hundreds of companies throughout your career. If you have a positive story for us, we'd love to hear it.
Very similar to the others. It's sometimes it's direct interaction with a company I haven't met before, and it leads to a second meeting and some interest in deeper valuation. In other cases, it's talking to investors who connect me to companies in their portfolio that we may not have thought of. My current company, Acadia, is known for neuroscience. We've been in the space for over 20 years, but we're making a move into rare diseases. And so I'm keen to use these types of interactions to really tell the message that, you think of us as a neurology company, but we're actually looking in rare diseases now that do not originate in the brain. And companies are not aware of that. They were just, announced we were doing that back at JP Morgan, but having that ability to talk to people live and to communicate that message leads us to interactions where, for example, bankers, investors are bringing us companies that fit in that space as well.
Thank you so much. And the next thing I want to bring up is something that I hear a lot from company leadership, particularly young companies, and everyone can weigh in on this. After you've had an interaction with pharma or an investor or anyone that you want to continue a relationship with, what's the most appropriate follow-up in the 6 to 18 months after that? What is a way that makes you encouraged to continue speaking to this person?
Usually when
Normally,
there is a development or a data update, then that would be great reason slash excuse to re-engage a few months down the road, be it sort of new data that you generated or even competitive data sets that you think are worthy of a conversation. And then you can use that as a hook to come back in to re-engage groups that who've known your story previously.
Valuable advice.
But I would just put that out as, it's broader than just any given meeting. Every company should have a calendar of when they will have something they can talk about and when their competitors will have something they can talk about, and know what those time points are, because then you can set up a cadence. Even if other people don't know you're coming, you can know, I want to target this fund, this company, this partner around this, and this. It just will make your life so much easier.
And having been in big pharma versus mid-sized and now biotech, one of the things is really build a relationship early as well. It's an advantage in smaller companies to start to leverage that, and for actionability reasons as well. We might be able to get in earlier because we have a certain set point in which we're able to transact. So being able to maintain that relationship, to develop that relationship early and maintain it throughout the process is very helpful.
Great. And Jason, when you're coaching your clients on what to do post-meeting, post-pitch, what is some of the advice you give them?
Yeah, well, I think you really said it. It's that value creation story. It's that path to value creation. So really knowing that and having that down, I encourage within 48 hours, like, well, that interaction is fresh, before they forget, before that, you had that handshake or that interaction. Right. It doesn't have to immediately result in a meeting or a conversation, but, outlining, that value creation story, that path, in 3 months, we're going to have this data set, and 6 months, we're going to have this readout or be presenting at this conference. But being very clear on that doesn't, it's very helpful actually to send that out. And that does set a map. It sends out a calendar for when you might be following up. And then, yeah, to what the other panelists said was, let's reach out before those events, as a follow-up.
Thank you. And something that also unifies this panel is that everyone has a scientific background. So I wanted to start out with your advice on the next question, Jason, but I think we can all weigh in on this. What are the most effective ways for biotech founders to communicate complex scientific breakthroughs in technology so that it resonates with both investors and partners? How can companies provide authentic messaging around the long-term value they offer and stand out? And the reason I mention this is because our science is becoming increasingly tech as well as biotech. So the messaging can be more complex. You're speaking to people with a lot of different backgrounds in a room. I think there's some anxiety in our community about how to do that right. So Jason, if you could start us off.
Well, there's a lot to unpack in that. I'll give it a shot and then open it up to the rest. But I think that first it's knowing your audience. If you're speaking to a very techie or scientific audience, then that story is going to be, you're going to be willing to get more complex into the in your story. Versus other audiences, right? Or all audiences. Positioning, if you haven't done a positioning workshop or really have a sound positioning statement to build on, that's the foundation for everything. It's the foundation for your story. It's the foundation for your slide deck. It's the foundation for your press releases. So that needs to be tight beforehand. I'd also advise on, getting to the punchline quickly. I know we've said this before, but I've seen this trap where, especially with scientists that want to start at the beginning and show the linear build of that story. This is the first study we did, and build, go through the whole process. But in these types of conversations, you really encourage starting with the punchline or the most essential data, the proof of concept. And then if a follow-up conversation is necessary to get into the diligence, let the diligence happen. But for complex science, I think that's, it's easy to kind of get wound up in the details right away. But really, again, knowing that what the positioning is, what the key differentiation is, and getting to that punchline, the most essential data first.
Yeah, Jason brings up a good point. If we're interested, we're going to go into due diligence. We'll want to see everything, have a deeper engagement with the company. We want to see enough at the beginning that gets us there. And so we don't have to be overwhelmed with data. We'll go through that. We'll have our scientists talk to their scientists and have a deeper level discussion. But get to the point, what is the key thing that sets your company apart from the others, and why we should be interested.
Let me add something, if I may, maybe a little bit counterintuitive, that in theory, we appreciate that complex and it's complex science and smart people are working on a hard problem. Otherwise, we wouldn't be having a conversation about something to begin with. So the complexity of the science is not the question. The question is, what is the important human problem that you are solving? And the companies that focus on the, oh, wow, this is cool tech, and not the, this is why it matters, tend to have more problems as opposed to going the other way around. This is why it matters. Okay, we agree this is important, and we like the thesis of how you're approaching it. As everyone said, we can go into the details later if we buy into the initial high level. And that doesn't take it's one slide. It's not a.
Yeah.
I've been in many situations where it's a 14-minute presentation and it's minute 9 where you get to the point. You see a lot of graphs. I think we should definitely start with the message and the problem. Now, Yuri, Carolyn, and Jason, you were all 3 at our Biotech CEO Summit back in July, and something that came up, and also Chris will jump in on this because I want to ask about partnerships as well. What's changing? What do companies need to know about the landscape now and in the next 18 months, as opposed to what the last 2 years have looked like? How can they be prepared?
In a way, I think a lot of operators know this already. So perhaps, no need to no need to overemphasize, but it goes without saying that the fundraising environment is a challenging one this year compared to a few years ago, and that it actually requires a higher bar of how we pitch, how we execute, how we communicate in order to get an investment or partnership done. So it also requires, I think, a lot of flexibility on how you want to get your company through to the next stage. So I think being creative about sources of financing, be creative and open-minded about terms, be also creative about how you want to actually, build optionality in today's market is actually more key than ever, especially when we have a situation where the IPO window is still not wide open. So that's not an easy path for many of these companies that would otherwise have loved to go public and raise a large equity round. I think that's that this is I would say a key hallmark of the environment that we're in today.
And maybe to add to that, I think we're all, as operators, used to thinking about financing risk in the context of the current raise or maybe the next raise. But because we're in this somewhat interesting time, the way to think about it is more than just the next raise. The standard model is if I build to an inflection point, there'll be somebody on the back end of that inflection point to put more money into the company to get to the next inflection point. And today, when we hear a pitch that is talking about the next inflection point and just enough money to get there, that is somewhat more challenging than understanding, okay, here are the multiple points of value that you need to get to create a product, and clearly what it is going to take to get to the actual product at the back end and to get reimbursed for that product at the back end. And so you're not asking simply about funding for the next experiment or the next study, but you're having a conversation about what is the journey look like, that reflects well on the management team, and it allows for those much more creative conversations and thought processes that Carolyn rightly brings up.
I think I'd just add that we're spending more time thinking about, or in getting questions about, I mentioned this earlier, it's the pipeline focus, the amount of funds that are being allocated or resources allocated to asset number 3 or asset number 4 in the pipeline when there's so much when there's so much riding on the execution of asset number 1. So I think those conversations have to be very, I think they're more scrutinized than ever on, and not that this has changed, on what are the inflection, what are the inflection points for these programs, what are the de-risking events, and how do we get there, and making sure that those endpoints, for those inflection points are very clear. There's more scrutiny than ever though on that. So we're just really thinking about how much time we spend on and how clear we are with those. With that value creation story for the lead program.
And from the buy side, we're thinking about creative ways to share risk rather than assume all the risk up front.
Yeah, I think risk sharing is important. Thank you for bringing that up. Something that I in my career, and also I've done some screening for companies for investors, and what I hear behind the scenes is that there's great ideas out there, and that's important, but we're investing or partnering with the teams. So the way that we're positioning the spotlight panels is, instead of being in a room and pitching, you're put on a panel in your therapeutic area as a key opinion leader and a leader. So what can these companies do to express positive leadership, both on the stage and off?
Well, I mean, I'll start things off. I think that we covered a lot of the foundational things already, but what are additional things that you can do is be willing to engage in other parts of the conversation too. Just to stretch. It's not all about pitching yourself and your story, right? Especially if you're on a panel, how can you engage, in the conversation, show just depth of, your knowledge and intelligence in other areas and other sectors and other technologies even, right? Nobody's expecting you to be the expert per se in that, but just showing that, I think that creates in terms of establishing as a subject matter expert or a key opinion leader. I think that really helps. That goes a long way, and also makes you more interesting, which is what these panels are all about. I think that gets lost quite a bit too, is there should be some entertainment value in a panel discussion too. These, if you want to keep people in their seats.
So presumably not everyone on the panel is going to have the same lead program in the same exact area. There's going to be some degree of complementarity, whether it's a diagnostic and a therapeutic, or however it would be. Different things, looking at different aspects of a disease. So bringing it back to overall, positivity is generally better received than negativity. We are all doing this on the investor side, on the operator side, from the janitors working at a biotech company through the CEOs and managing directors, because we want to make sick people better. Right? So there are problems that have to do with human health and well-being. We want to fix those. Otherwise, we could be doing a lot of things that would be easier. Knowing how the other people on the panel are doing how their teams are doing something which is complementary along the point of what Jason said to what you're doing, and how as a industry, this network of teams are trying to improve the condition that is being solved for, goes a long way. I mean, that is excellence that is what makes somebody a opinion that people seek. They know how all the pieces fit together, and that starts from the disease. That doesn't start from I have a small molecule.
Indeed, indeed. So one thing I did want to bring up, and I think one of the ways to show excellence in leadership, is how a a leader communicates a negative event or a setback, either for their company or in the past in their career. Does anyone have any examples or thoughts on how to express a negative event or where they've seen someone do it with grace?
Well, actually, there are plenty of examples in real life because biotech is all about ups and downs. The success is never linear, or rather, you read press releases about this company getting acquired for X billion, but actually the history behind that the company usually is full of color. So, and I think actually even more importantly, given the nature of our business, it's really important to find a leader that's able to do and shine and continue to thrive in those situations because we all know that we're in for a ride and that ride can occasionally be rough. So I think the best examples of people that I've worked with or had the good fortune of working with are leaders that are transparent and intellectually honest with your investors, with your board, with their team, with the situation at hand, right? Whatever that problem or setting is. And also at the same time, and depending on sort of when something happens, let's say you have a setback in a clinical trial, right? And maybe that's a surmountable setback, maybe it's not. Let's say in a case where you're trying to work things through, I think be able to communicate that in a transparent manner about and you will have different level of information at different time points. Be also transparent about that, right? So let's say something happened and then point B, 2 minutes later, you need to actually talk to your team or your board. You should come across as being sort of, you don't have to know it all or have the answers, but communicate that. Say, well, look, this just happened. We're not panicking. We're looking into this. These are the steps we're taking, and we'll come back with you with more information. And then in a timely manner, come back to give an update again on sort of what you've learned and whether or not you are reformulating a plan to address it. So I think that communication is key, even when you don't have the full picture. As long as you acknowledge it and let them know, and whoever the stakeholders are, the gaps and ways to address them. So that's really key because sweeping things under the rug is not helpful because when people find out that you didn't communicate in a timely manner is actually even worse. And pretending that you have all the answers when you do is also very dangerous and potentially disastrous. So that's really key.
Intellectual integrity, and you're absolutely right, it is never worth trying to minimize or hide something. It's always a bad move. Jason?
Yeah, I was trying to think, over the years, I've been in the war room, if you will, for these conversations many times. And to Carolyn's point, it's by nature more of the negative than the positive. Actually, it's more of the mixed scenario. And that's what I want to chime in on. I think that in most cases, the teams don't necessarily want to sweep it under the rug. It's that they've learned something really interesting from a failed or mixed results study, to use that as an example. And they're excited about moving forward. And they want to focus on looking forward. And by doing that, maybe they gloss over the actual results of the study. And that could be problematic. That could be damaging to reputation, right? So I think it's really important not to just move too quickly past what we've learned, what's happened, those results, whether it was a large placebo effect or you just missed statistical significance or whatever it might be, right? But to spend the time to really understand that, be transparent about that, that's what we're all saying, and then move forward and look forward to what's interesting. But yeah, I think when you're in the moment, you're so close to it, you have such a attachment to your pipeline, your assets, and what you're doing. It's very easy to be overly optimistic, right? And I just want to make sure our teams capture the moment and share that in a transparent way. Another thing I'll just add to this too is there's a lot of credibility and reputation earned when an executive team just says, you know what, this didn't turn out the way it worked out. We thought it was. That we did everything we could. Science failed us this time, and sometimes that happens. and we're going to have to sell, we're going to have to close up shop, we're going to have to return money to shareholders. I've seen executives, respond very well from that in their next step in their career, right? And there's a lot of goodwill earned from that. So those are hard decisions, but things that we help work through.
Then let me bring it back as well to the points that we made at the very beginning about the advantage of it also meeting people in person. The investment is partially in the science and partially in the people executing it. So it is never in someone's best interest to do anything which tarnishes the reputation. There is a lot of benefit in full transparent and extreme transparency, because the semblance of being non-transparent is sometimes worse than actually not being non-transparent. So everyone's going to have the same data. Know it, own it, say what you know and say what you don't know. And then everyone out there is a potential resource to help you get through it. Not, if you view it any other way, then you're missing out on opportunities. So why not take advantage of this big world full of people that want to help make sick people better?
And there's also a downstream ripple effect to that as well. For example, if you're antagonistic with the FDA, it's going to be much harder to get your product through. And oftentimes we see complete changeover at the C-suite because there's a stalemate with the regulators, and no matter where the data is, it's going to be extremely difficult to move it forward.
Well, Sarah Demy is here, and I want to take a moment before we move into the Q&A to thank everyone on the panel for an amazing discussion. I learned things today. And Sarah, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, before we even begin, I'd like to make a comment to reinforce something Yuri said, and I'm sure that everybody in this panel and everybody viewing us thinks. All of us are in this enterprise of healing sick people together, everybody who adds to it. And, just being part of that community, we feel privileged to be part of it. And I know all of you do as well. And that's the importance of what we do. So thank you for mentioning that, Yuri. And thank you all for being part of it, as I mentioned. So now on to some questions. The first thing I'd like to ask you is, when you're dealing with an early stage company, a seed company out of university, great science, great scientific advisors, as they're putting together their decks for their companies, and we're talking about understanding the marketplace that they might go to. What data should they pull from? They may not know where they're going. Where did they get the data at such an early stage to show you or demonstrate to you that they may have a market opportunity? How do you do that when it's so early? Jason, you're the scientist there. So are you, Yuri. So are you, Caroline. And of course, Chris. What do you recommend to companies when it's so early? Jason, you took a deep breath.
I'll go
Yeah.
first. Yeah, sure. So I mean, this is really interesting to me, and it's sort of a side project for me too. Helping companies, faculty, for example. I'm on the Dean's Leadership Council for the School of Biological Sciences at UC San Diego. And part of that is just helping faculty engage with industry and learning about that. And what I find is that at that stage, it's so early, they don't know what the market is. And it may be just too early to know what the market is. So, going back to what I said earlier, it's just, what is the essential, you don't know what the killer application is yet at that point, but what is the most essential data, what is the proof of concept that you have? What is that aha moment, right? You don't need the whole story, you don't need the whole wind up, but lead with that aha moment, right? And I think that's really important. But a lot of those presentations look like a classroom presentation, and we try to help, think what is the current situation? What's the problem that exists in the world today? What did my experiment prove that shows that I might have a solution for this? And then I think that VCs and other entrepreneurs can help find the market for it. But that's a unique situation because it's so early.
Yeah, because we will be doing a seed showcase, for instance, at BioFuture. Those are really early stage companies. They don't have much information at that point in time, and anything that can help them get a leg up. Chris or Yuri or Caroline, do you have anything that you'd like to add to that?
So I maybe have a extreme biased view on this, but if you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there. So this is part of the metric of the management team, right? The ability to weave the story about why what we have is compelling about something which is 7 to 10 years in the future, if you think about a development timeline. If the team can't express that, then it is back to, gee whiz, I've got cool science. And the investors don't have the time to help you figure out how to apply it. Right? So you
Right.
have to come to us with that story.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. Anybody else want to weigh in on that? Chris, Caroline?
I've seen.
Go ahead, Chris.
Sorry, Caroline. No, I've seen early grants, for example, where SBIR programs where they have to put a commercial analysis together, and some are, they've engaged industry veterans with with some commercial experience to help them put that together. And then I've seen the opposite, where they've got a friend in the business school put it together, and there's marked difference. I think it comes down to the target, linking target to disease, and which would be the best place to take things, and then you can build around that, as opposed to this could be a multi-billion-dollar opportunity because we can do a lot of things with it. That's not going to resonate at all.
Yeah, that falls flat all the time. Caroline, did you want to add something?
I was going to provide a little bit of context because, back in the day, the good old days where the acquisition of capital is a little bit less challenging. There were several groups that were working, several investment groups that actually work directly hand in hand with academia, right? I think these days it still happens, but maybe at a lower rate than it used to be. And we do see actually a lot of investment teams trying to help academic founders. So firstly, understand their science, and then with that applied industry knowledge and market knowledge that they have, right, to help the scientific founder carve a path forward to an application that makes sense. So I think these processes happen, unfortunately, less so these days, just because we're in a risk-off market, and these projects tend to be very early. So short of that, I think it's probably helpful for scientific founders to understand whether or not they can learn from expertise of, say, let's say your scientific founder is applying, trying to apply a technology to specific disease. I think the natural first step is to actually engage KOLs for that disease area and trying to understand from them or learn from them, right, the landscape and available treatments, what are the gaps, right, and how something like this could fit in the disease area that they're treating, right? Just listing one example. So there are ways you can gain that knowledge, even if you would not say, I'm not a business graduate, I'm not an investor by background, but at least some of these foundational knowledge can be gained by trying to build the right network or advisory network, right, around yourself to get more knowledgeable. And then with that, right, then you can start crafting a story together that hangs.
Right. And I hear what you're saying, that, each early stage company already has to identify the market that they want to go into. If they have a molecule, for instance, that may be applied to different diseases, they have to pick the disease area. They have to understand it early stage. Right.
In order to know what to pick, you have to be knowledgeable about these areas. So I think the right way to do it, to explore it, would be, if you're not an expert for something, that's what I do every single day, right? I'm not going to be knowledgeable about the 500 companies that we see in a month. So, the right thing to do is to reach out to experts, and to learn from them.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Another question that we have is, and this is one that I know all of you feel, with the IPO market slowing to a crawl. I would say it's slowed to a crawl. How has that changed your view of what companies and types of innovation you invest in? So Caroline, then Yuri, maybe Chris after that.
Right. So, I just actually interestingly, I just came back from China last week, and many people don't know this on this side of the world, but the Hong Kong Stock Exchange market is actually red hot right now for biotech companies. So
We've been hearing that.
right, it's very interesting to see, and I throw that out because things are always cyclical, right? Nothing is static. So we're in this time and moment where perhaps unfortunately the IPO market is closed and it hasn't been as robust as we'd like it to be. So company really needs to go back to fundamentals and think about a roadmap that I wouldn't call this sort of volatility proof, but have your milestones be your guideposts. Let data generation and actual value creation be your guideposts, rather than, oh, because I'm going to bank on, the market recovering in X number of months, I will be able to go out there and, become public, etc. That kind of talk track will not resonate anymore with anybody. And if we were to be intellectually honest, nobody actually really knows, right, when that's going to happen. So the way that we work with our companies, either internally or externally, new companies or even existing portfolio companies, is understand the value creation for your roadmap to actually create the data that gets you closer to having having a therapeutic that patients could use, and figure out financing options that could try to get you there. That does not necessarily include an IPO. So I think any sort of I think it's a bit disingenuous when people come to us and say, yeah, I know the market is closed, but when it's open, we'll go public. But the truth is we don't know, right, when that window is. So engaging your inside investors and external investors on understanding ways to get capital, either through partnerships, non-dilutive, grants, whatever that could be, that is independent of actually going public. That's really important in creating optionality to allow the company to have another day to fight to do the right thing for patients.
Another 6 months to fight. Yeah. So Dave, 6 months, 7 months. Yuri or Chris, Jason, do you want to pop into that?
Yeah,
Yuri?
no, so I think Carolyn gave a very comprehensive answer, and again, it touches on what we were saying earlier. Know your story and know your path to value creation, because if you don't, then you're saying, I please give me a lifeline. That's a very different story versus here's how we're going to create value over an extended period of time. And I know that we can create value in these rough waters with X is very different from I hope we can get X such that we can create value.
Thank you.
And then Sarah, what we're hearing is how can we work together? Rather than companies were waiting either for that, the big exit, are there ways that we can work in partnership to get them across the finish line?
Great. Thank you, Chris. Jason, do you want to add anything?
I think we covered it. Catalyst, right? I think those are de-risking events and have to have a clear path for that, to be able to communicate that.
Great, thank you. So one of our questions, and maybe we'll have this, it's after 12 now, be our last question. What do you think about a company that is fully virtual, that is doing everything with outside providers? Are they saving money in the long run? Are they not building skills within their own company if everything is outsourced?
I don't think there's one absolute answer to that. There are companies that are single asset companies, and there are companies that are, platform companies with deep tech. If there's a single asset company that's trying to move things forward, that's fine. Right? That is a model. If it is a deep tech company where you're trying to build out a knowledge base, it's hard to build out a knowledge base around your technology unless you have people that are understanding and implementing your technology. But there's probably 1,000 flavors, and with multiple investors in one room, you'll probably get N+10 answers.
I guess the question is, how good is the oversight in terms of, from the monitoring the CROs, CMOs, whoever you're using to execute those studies. If you have the right oversight in place and have quality vendors, those will be things that, the buy side will check in diligence. So it's important they're on top of that.
That's
so
a
that
good
they can
question.
follow in. Yeah.
Yeah, Chris, how would you do due diligence on a company where everything is outsourced?
Well, I mean, there will be a single collection point for an e-room from the various vendor. And we see that all the time now. People are using CROs to do toxicology studies that are doing manufacturing, that are executing earlier phase clinical trials. So it's really how good the quality oversight is on that would impact whether or not we would go forward.
Great, thank you. I think then we can wrap this up, Lila. I'd like to ask everybody to just one recommendation for all of our presenting companies, one thing that you would love to see or think they should think about. So we'll start with you, Chris, since you're on my screen right now.
Okay. Show us how you're different. Show us how you're better. That is really the fundamental that would attract attention from pharma.
Perfect. Thank you. Caroline.
I was actually going to say, hang in there and persevere.
That's
Because-
really, really good advice.
Yes, I know what you're doing is hard, and I know what everyone's trying to do is good. So, and sometimes hard things are worth doing. So hang in there.
Perfect. Thank you. Yuri.
The only things worth doing are hard. I take it one step further.
Great point.
Yeah, I would only encourage everyone to keep it up. And if it is getting hard, then that is a good reason to pause and think carefully about how do you distill things down to the diamond that you believe is there. The better you can express it, the better other people will see it. And if you want to make a diamond, you need pressure. So there's a lot of pressure right now. We hope to see a lot of diamonds.
Wow, great. Thank you, Yuri. Jason.
Hard to follow that sage advice right there. I think
I
that we heard be different, hang in there, respond to the pressure. I think it just lean into your why. Really lean in this. It's people will remember that. Your audiences are gonna remember your why and your purpose. And I think that's also gonna help you pull through when things are tough. So just really know what lean into why you do what you do.
Great. Thank you, Jason. Lila, last word for you.
Oh, goodness. That is definitely a hard set of acts to follow. I would just say what you mean. When you craft your message, imagine that you're speaking to someone. Don't make it overcomplicated and get to the point right away, because it makes it easier for those that you want to convince to help you.
Great. Thank you all. So that's all the time that we have today, everybody. I do want to thank all of our panelists once again. Great advice for everybody who's viewing it. I'd like to thank Yoast and our partner, Biotech Gate Partnering. Thank you, Yoast. I'd like to thank the audience for joining us. Please note that this will be posted on our YouTube channel later today, so it's been recorded. And look forward to more virtual salons coming in the future. Yost, I see you popped in. Do you want to say anything?
No, that's it. Thanks again for all of you for
Okay.
joining. It's very interesting. Thank you so
I
much.
did want to add one thing. We still have availability for companies on our spotlight panels, and we have a range of exciting topics. If you're
At
interested
BioFuture.
at BioFuture New York this October, if you are interested in joining one of those panels, please reach out to me. I'd love to talk to you.
Perfect. Thank you. With that said, Thank you, everybody. Goodbye from New York and goodbye from around the world.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
You.
Bye.